I'm a low-grade omega. I've never been a good person, and because I was broke as hell, I faked my way into a relationship with a rich young alpha. After I got the money, I bailed. But I accidentally got pregnant and ran back to the lowers. When he finally caught me, the alpha stared at me coldly. The baby's mine. You can get lost after you give birth. His scorching breath nearly devoured me. Julian slammed me against the glass door, my palms squeaking as I braced myself against the surface. Tears spilled from the corners of my eyes, and he lapped them up. You're so good for me, baby. A shiver ran down my spine. I heard him chuckle as his canines pressed against my gland, a jolt running through my nerves. His pheromones were so thick I felt like I was drowning. He lifted me, slick and soaked, into his arms. My breath caught in my throat, and I woke up with a gasp. I sat up, clutching my belly and wiping the hot sweat from my forehead. God, this was so annoying. Another one of those dreams. I changed my pants, then went to the bathroom to wash the ones I'd soiled. My place was a tiny studio, maybe 300 square feet in total. It was small, but more than enough for just me. The lowers was a rough neighborhood. The buildings were old and crumbling, and compared to the heights, you could pretty much call it a slum. The crime rate was way worse, too. You could still hear people shouting and fighting outside late at night. I hadn't been back in a long time. Even as an omega, I used to be able to strut through this area without a problem. But not anymore. It had gotten even more chaotic, and my current condition made things inconvenient. Even a baggy t-shirt couldn't hide the curve of my stomach. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling deeply frustrated. It had been 4 or 5 months since I'd come back. I didn't consciously think about Julian, but in the dead of night, I couldn't help but crave what we used to do. Back then, he was so rough with me I'd end up in tears. Thinking back on it now didn't make it seem any better, but it still felt like it wasn't enough. Damn it, I was seriously losing my mind. I missed his pheromones, the soft words he'd used to coax me, the fierce and rough way he'd force me. I missed everything about him. The more I thought about it, the more pissed off I got. Sometimes I even felt like crying, which was definitely not normal. The next morning, I threw on a big jacket and went to our neighborhood's local clinic. The doctor at the clinic was a handsome alpha. When he saw me, he put down what he was doing and led me to the break room. What's wrong? Not feeling well? I was a little embarrassed to bring it up. Dr. Evans, my emotions have been really unstable lately. I didn't think I actually missed Julian, or that I was so madly in love with him that I'd get these sudden urges to cry, my heart aching with a strange regret, thinking I should have just been straight with him from the start. Seeing how anxious I was, he placed his hands on my shoulders, his touch gentle but firm. Let's sit down and talk. After I sat, he poured me a cup of hot water. How have they been unstable? I clutched the cup, trying to be tactful. I've been thinking about my previous alpha. His gaze dropped to my stomach. The baby's father? I froze for a second, then nodded. Dr. Evans's voice was steady and reassuring. Don't worry. This is a common symptom for pregnant omegas who lack their alpha's pheromones. In the past, if it wasn't managed well, it could be a huge problem, but now we can use pheromone extracts to suppress the urges and soothe your emotions. Or he hesitated for a moment. You could find a trustworthy alpha for a light scenting to calm your agitation. If you don't mind, I could help. If an alpha isn't careful with the amount, it can cause an allergic reaction. It was a rejection caused by the residual pheromones from the alpha who had marked me. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or worried. If I just tough it out, will it affect the baby? Dr. Evans answered honestly, as long as you're getting enough nutrition, it usually won't have any major effects. The main issue is that it'll be turbulent. You'll be very uncomfortable, and it's highly likely your body will be worn down. While these are just probabilities, you still need to take it seriously. He sighed. That's why I suggested you not keep it in the first place. These were my concerns, but he trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. But I had refused. I grew up in a group home in the lowers. Earlier this year, a gang of squatters broke in and robbed the place, injuring a lot of people. Among them were a younger kid I looked out for and an omega girl whose gland was damaged. They were the most seriously hurt. The local charities here are corrupt. They gave a little money, but it wasn't nearly enough for the surgery, let alone the aftercare. So I set my sights on the son of a big shot who often came to the lowers to do charity work. It was only after I hooked up with Julian that I found out the big shot was just one of his family's subordinates. Julian's status was far more prestigious. At first, I just wanted some money. I had no intention of getting emotionally involved. Who knew he'd be so much more innocent than I expected? He'd blush just from holding my hand. The thought brought a sudden sting to my nose. I quickly composed myself and gave an embarrassed smile. "It's a free baby, what can I say? Dr. Evans, you don't understand. My alpha was the most handsome alpha I've ever seen." Realizing he was an alpha too, I quickly added, "No offense, you're a close second." It didn't really sound like a compliment. I gave a sheepish laugh. Dr. Evans laughed too. "It's fine. My pheromones will only be enough to gently soothe you. Not too much, I promise. No need to bite the gland, and no intimacy required." Dr. Evans had always been professional and polite. Since he put it that way, I didn't see any reason to be difficult and nodded. But the moment he released a tiny bit of his pheromones, my body rejected it violently. My face went pale instantly. Dr. Evans frowned. "I really don't recommend medication unless it's absolutely necessary. The drugs were too damaging to an omega's glands. If possible, your alpha's pheromones would be best. I used to get into fights and I always came here to get patched up." Over time, Dr. Evans and I got to know each other. I had disappeared for almost a year. They didn't know what I'd been up to or who I'd met, only that I sent money back on time. They had no idea who my alpha was. Getting my hands on his pheromones was going to be tough. Besides, I hadn't exactly left on good terms. I wouldn't dare show my face in front of him. This was a mess. I guess I'd just have to bear it. Eat more. I did care about my own body after all. After leaving the clinic, I shoved my hands in my pockets and headed for Rico's place for a meal. He'd severed the tendons in his hand. Luckily, they were reattached, but he probably wouldn't be able to draw again. He'd seen a doctor at a big hospital in the Heights who said another surgery might let him draw again, but the success rate was low and the cost was high. I had transferred him a chunk of money, but Rico refused to take it. I had to get tough with him before he finally accepted it, but he still hadn't gone for the surgery. I had the director of the home pay for his and the girl's first surgeries. No one dared to ask where that money came from. He always felt like I'd sacrificed a lot for them, but I hadn't. It was Julian who spent the money and lost his innocence to me, even if he was a monster in bed. I wasn't far from the clinic when my phone rang. "Leo, man, I'm starting dinner. When are you gonna get here?" I answered lazily, "What's the rush?" Rico was my brother. We always had each other's backs. We were practically family in the lowers. "Head, just waiting on you. Almost there." As I spoke, I stopped short, my gaze sharpening as I looked across the street. The lowers was a chaotic place, full of vagrants who would follow people. But I wasn't someone to be messed with here. Most people knew better than to follow me. Yet I could feel a piercing stare locked on my back. A sense of danger put me on high alert. But when I looked, it was just a street full of hurried pedestrians. No one looked out of place. I picked up my pace, leaving the street behind me. The sound of footsteps behind me was intermittent, sometimes there, sometimes not. My heart tightened, and I gripped the folding knife in my pocket. I quickly ducked into another alley. As the person entered behind me, I spun around and slashed with my knife. But they were clearly prepared. In just a few moves, they disarmed me. They didn't get away unscathed, though. I landed a solid kick. The man took a step back and didn't press forward. Instead, he bowed his head respectfully toward the space behind me. "Sir." My pupils contracted. I whirled around. It gets dark fast in the lowers, and the sky was already dimming. A devastatingly handsome man walked in from the other end of the alley. He was tall, dressed in a sharp, expensive, custom-tailored suit with a light trench coat over it, exuding an air of extraordinary nobility. But his presence was intimidating, his deep-set eyes cold and sinister. The look he gave me was icy and merciless. It was a familiar face, but the gentleness was gone. The man's innate aristocratic air was completely out of place in this environment. It was as if the grimy alley had brightened just by his presence. My breath hitched. "Julian?" I choked out. His cold gaze fell to my stomach, his expression unchanging. In fact, since seeing me, he showed no emotion at all, just a detached indifference. I, on the other hand, was blushing furiously, a mix of excitement and terror. What was he doing here? I instinctively tried to suck in my stomach and backed away. Watching him walk toward me step by step made the hair on my arms stand up. I turned and ran. Fuck. If he catches me, I don't know how I'm gonna die. A chill shot up my spine. This was not how I ever imagined reuniting with Julian. Suddenly, several large men blocked my path. When I turned back, Julian, in his leather shoes, was already closing in. He grabbed my arms, his voice like ice. Where do you think you're running, Leo? His chilling expression and gaze suggested that the towering rage had long since burned out, leaving only a cold hatred and blatant disgust. He practically lifted me off the ground. His grip on my arms was agonizing. My face was pale, but I didn't make a sound. Julian smelled the unfamiliar pheromones on me. His voice turned sharp. You're such a slut. Can't even behave after leaving me. Found a replacement already. Huh? I froze, not realizing I still smelled of Dr. Evans's pheromones. I blurted out. You didn't? Julian sneered, then said no more. He dragged me toward my apartment. My scalp tingled. He knew where I lived. There was no way I could hide the pregnancy now. My mind was a mess. By the time we reached my door, my heart was pounding and I was trembling so badly I could barely stand. I would have collapsed if he wasn't holding me. He pulled the key from my pocket and opened the door while his bodyguards stood watch outside. The moment the door closed, I was enveloped in his alpha pheromones. My mouth went dry. Julian listened to me. He wouldn't listen. He clamped a hand over my mouth, his other hand roaming over my body. He laughed coldly. Already slick. God, you're such a slut. Can you even live without a man? He was definitely saying it just to hurt me. I knew that, but my heart still twisted in pain. My eyes burned. He never would have talked to me like that before. Even though we'd met in a bar, even though I was just a server, he had always been so polite and gentlemanly. I shook my head. No, it's not like that. But even though I was hurt, I couldn't stop myself from pressing closer. His pheromones smelled so good, so comforting. How did you find me, Julian? He didn't answer, nor did he ask why someone who was supposed to be dead had reappeared in the lowers. He just looked down coldly, watching me squirm against him. Julian. I hadn't been exposed to his pheromones in so long. This sudden, overwhelming dose was making me lose my mind. And alpha's pheromones are inherently oppressive. As a low-grade omega, all it took was a little for me to completely submit to him. Before, he would have never deigned to use his pheromones to dominate someone. But now, the almost suffocating scent was too much for me. It's too much, I gasped. Julian held me with one hand, his eyes sweeping over the tiny, dilapidated apartment. You left me to live in a place like this? I stumbled after him, my legs giving out. I fell to my knees, but he caught me in a flash, pulling me into his arms. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my gaze hazy as I kissed the corner of his eye. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Julian's breathing deepened. He kicked open the bedroom door with a crack, splintering the frame. He wasn't gentle. My pheromones were driving him wild, too. His movements were rough, completely disregarding my feelings. His eyes, naked and searing, stared at me. Leo, looking at you like this, you're just begging to be fucked. I struggled for a moment, tears rolling down my face. My bangs stuck to my flushed cheeks. Don't do this. Covered my stomach with my hands. Julian let go of my legs and moved my hands away. What are you hiding? Something you don't want me to see? He glared at me viciously, his bloodshot eyes a mix of hatred and lust. The alpha's pheromones saturated every corner of the room. The next morning, his assistant had already delivered a change of clothes. Nutrient packs and alpha suppressants were in a small cooler, and a hot breakfast sat on the table. Julian was tall and imposing, which made the rental apartment feel even smaller. The moment he sat on the sofa, a section of it immediately sank, startling him. What kind of shitty spring sofa was this? He was a rich kid, after all. He'd never been in a place like this, let alone spent the night in such a wreck. That just made him even more irritated. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got, and the darker his face became. Last night, the Omega had clutched his stomach, crying pitifully. The sight had stirred his cruel, sadistic side. He had snapped, "What are you crying for? So delicate." Julian had wanted to say more hurtful things, to do more cruel things, to unleash all the anger in his heart. The deception, the disappearance, the abandonment, none of it was forgivable. Julian was still filled with hate, but he wasn't a completely reckless alpha, and he knew not to go too far. Amid his frustration, there seemed to be other emotions at play. He had only entered me shallowly. He stood by the shabby window and had just lit a cigarette when the battered bedroom door creaked open. He instinctively crushed the cigarette and looked over, barking, "What are you doing out here?" My face was flushed, but my legs were weak. "I'm hungry," I said softly. Julian's jaw tensed. "There's breakfast on the table," he said impatiently. When I didn't move, he sneered, "What, are you waiting for me to carry you and coax you to eat like I used to?" I forced a placating smile. "No, I just wanted to eat breakfast with you." Julian crushed the cigarette in his hand into dust. "I don't fall for that act anymore, Leo. I'm telling you, I came here for what's in your stomach, not for you. The day you left me, we were over." My eyes burned and my breath hitched. It hurt, but I kept the smile on my face. "I know, but just eating a meal together doesn't mean I'll think you still like me." He didn't say anything. He turned to leave, but I quickly grabbed his arm. "Wait." His eyes were ice cold, watching to see what trick I'd pull next. I stared at the scratches on his handsome chest. "Put on your clothes before you go." He was still wearing a soft, silk robe. The rich kid must have brought a whole wardrobe with him on his trip. The belt was tied loosely, revealing his firm, muscular chest, and his long legs were just barely visible. If he went out like that, some other Omega was bound to notice him. He yanked his arm away. The door opened and slammed shut with a bang. The bodyguard and assistant waiting outside jumped, startled by their boss's sudden exit. Sat at the table but didn't pick up my chopsticks. For some reason, my emotions were all over the place. Tears splashed onto the table, and I quickly wiped them away. Damn it, what was there to cry about? So embarrassing. People from the lowers needed a lot of paperwork to live in the heights. If you couldn't find a job, you couldn't stay there for long. At the time, I was a temp bartender at a club. Julian was there for a friend's birthday party, and I was one of the servers assigned to their private room. The manager picked me because I was good-looking and reliable. I had assumed these rich kids would be sleazy, so if they were, I figured I'd make a move on Julian. But instead, they spent the whole night talking about their ambitions, about poetry and traveling the world, about stock prices and market trends. It all sounded very sophisticated, and I didn't understand a word of it. I carefully glanced at the most handsome alpha in the room. I'd seen him before at events for the group home and other charities in the lowers. The director always asked me to help at those things. Even though I didn't have much education, I was considered one of the more cultured people from my neighborhood. The rich kid was always heavily protected. Even the director never saw his face. I just happened to be moving some boxes to the VIP lounge and saw Julian through a crack in the door. The alpha was wearing a black formal suit, his skin impossibly pale, his features stunningly beautiful. Every move he made was dripping with elegance. It was like he had his own built-in filter. I finally understood what the phrase lighting up a dingy room meant. "So beautiful. Who's there?" the alpha asked, looking up. Our eyes met. He froze. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly scurried away with the box. Just as I left, I heard his bodyguards rush in. "Is something wrong, sir?" "Who was that just now?" "One of the workers moving supplies." I didn't hear what he said after that. I walked to the expensive mechanical room. All the equipment in here was donated by that young master's family. I muttered, "Must be nice to be rich." Seeing him again, and remembering I was there specifically to get close to him, made me inexplicably nervous. Julian sat on the sofa, and under the flashing neon lights, his eyes were soft, like a piece of polished jade. After the group home was robbed, none of the local organizations would help, so I thought of the rich kid. Why did I choose Julian? Probably because he had a clean aura and looked kind. And sure enough, kind people get taken advantage of. I was never a good person, not since I was a kid. A cheater, a liar, a hustler with a crooked heart. I wanted money. At first, I just wanted to borrow some from him. But as they say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Even if he seemed easygoing, he was still a rich kid. So that night, I was very proactive about pouring him drinks. When he couldn't drink anymore, I drank for him. Julian's friends were surprised and were about to dismiss me, this self-appointed drinking buddy. Julian just laughed. It's fine. He's kind of cute. And a little familiar. He then looked at me as I bent over to serve him from time to time, and said in a gentle, gentlemanly voice, I can hold my liquor, you know. You don't have to drink for me. But you're blushing. I was wearing a cheap, black lace suppressant collar. Julian's eyes flicked to my neck. An omega. It's fine, I said with a shy smile. He was silent for 2 seconds, then shifted over, patting the spot next to him. If you don't mind, you can sit here. Of course I didn't mind. I immediately slid in next to him. Everyone stared at me, sizing me up, but no one said anything. They just figured it was one of Julian's little amusements. It was a bit of a novelty, though. Probably because of his strict upbringing, Julian was about to graduate from college and had never been with an omega. It was impossible for an attractive alpha not to have suitors, especially not Julian. But now he was letting someone so ordinary sit next to him. It was impossible not to stare. Luckily, his friends were decent guys. Their scrutiny was restrained, and they didn't give me a hard time. We played a drinking game, a game of luck. Tonight, Julian's luck was bad. He lost a few times, and before he could even reach for his glass, I'd grab it and down it in one go, raising my eyebrows at him with bright eyes, as if seeking praise. Julian couldn't help but laugh. Out loud. I really can hold my liquor. You don't need to help me. Oh, I said. Later, he drank a few glasses. The topics they discussed were over my head, but they weren't exactly state secrets. When Julian got up to use the restroom, I followed him. At the restroom door, the alpha looked at me, exasperated. Are you gonna follow me inside? I stumbled and fell against him. It was a clumsy move, but he instinctively wrapped an arm around my waist. His body tensed. The clean scent of ebony and rose filled his nose, weaving around him. Julian felt himself getting hotter. He knew he should let go, but his arm only tightened around me. He suddenly clutched his neck. Sorry, my rut is starting. It was because of my omega pheromones, but Julian felt that if his rut hadn't already been close, a little bit of pheromones wouldn't have triggered it early. So it was his own fault. I'll call someone to take you home, he said, his brow furrowed. For now, go into the restroom and lock the door. Julian couldn't guarantee my scent wouldn't attract the wrong kind of attention. His gaze on me grew deeper. I threw my arms around his waist and pushed him into one of the stalls. He froze for a moment, his voice hoarse. What are you doing? I tilted my head up, my face hot and red. I'll let you bite me. I ripped off the lace collar, exposing my neck to him. A temporary mark. Julian's Adam's apple bobbed. His dark eyes fell to the pale column of my throat, and without hesitation, he bent his head and bit down. My pupils shrank as I was plunged into a world of ice and fire. Our pheromones mingled and tangled, the scent of ebony and rose steeped in wine. In my days, I thought, no wonder he said he could hold his liquor. He called for a car to pick us up and left with me in his arms. In Julian's mind, a newly marked omega couldn't be separated from their alpha. It was too dangerous. But in the car, I hooked my arm around his neck and slowly moved closer. He was hot and uncomfortable. Finally, he took off his jacket and draped it over me, whispering, I'm sorry. I'll take you to the hospital. I grabbed the collar of his disheveled shirt. Can I go home with you? Fearing he hadn't heard me, I pressed my lips to his ear. Can I go home with you? The meaning of those words was obvious. When we got to Julian's place in the city, the moment we walked in, our pheromones spilled out uncontrollably. I was drunk and flushed from the alpha scent. He couldn't resist pressing a kiss to the corner of my lips, and from there, things spiraled. But after he pushed me onto the bed, Julian suddenly came to his senses. He pulled the covers over me. I blinked my wet eyes at him. What's wrong? He kissed my gland. I'm sorry. Then he got up and left. With his weight gone, it felt like the alpha had taken all the warmth with him. I shivered. My eyes roamed around the room. It was so clean and beautiful. I had seduced this rich kid with my pheromones. Thinking about his reaction, I curved my lips into a smile. How interesting. That night, I was sound asleep when I felt something licking my neck. I hummed a few times and sank deeper into sleep. Felt so good. A faint scent of wine, light and fruity with a hint of flowers. The next morning, we woke up staring at each other in bed. I'm sorry. I want money. We spoke at the same time. He looked stunned. What? I was a little embarrassed. If I said I want money now that you've marked me, would you think I'm a bad person? Julian instinctively shook his head. No. He hadn't been able to sleep last night and had come over in the middle of the night. An alpha in rut, even with just a temporary mark, feels possessive of an omega. Holding me, he had slept soundly. Now he abruptly removed the arm that was draped across my waist. I said shamelessly, you know how it is. After an omega gets marked, they get really dependent on their alpha. I'll probably have to quarantine for a couple of days. If I had some money, I wouldn't have to work at a place like that. So I hope you can compensate me for my lost wages. And of course, you're the first one to ever mark me. I'm clean, don't worry. My heart was pounding as I so brazenly asked for money. I was afraid he'd beat me up and throw me out. But Julian was silent for a moment. Okay, I'll transfer it to you right away. I'm not sure how much is appropriate. Is $30,000 enough? Or is that too little? That's enough. I hadn't expected him to be so generous. I opened my payment app. Just add a note. Unconditional gift. He blinked, then couldn't help but laugh. Can I have the honor of adding you as a friend? I didn't dare to look him in the eye. Sure. That day, not wanting him to feel like he'd gotten a raw deal, I let him bite my neck one more time before I left. I went back to my tiny basement room, my mind full of Julian. The golden boy had been played, and he was smiling and sending money. I had originally thought that if he just beat me up, I'd drop the whole damsel in distress act. I had judged him right. Julian was classy and dignified. I lay on my narrow bed and transferred the money to the director of the home. After putting my phone down, I rolled over and pulled the blanket over my face, hiding the smile in my eyes. After that, he kept coming to that bar. He'd book a private room just to have me there with him. He was picky about his wine, and he always ordered bottles that would get me a bigger commission. He barely touched them. He'd have them stored, so friends could drink them when they visited. Occasionally, he'd give me extra money to compensate for taking up my work time, and I accepted it without any guilt. At night, he'd take me home. The bus was crowded. I looked at the impossibly elegant alpha and wanted to shield him from the jostling people. But he grabbed my waist and pulled me firmly in front of him, leaning down to whisper in my ear, "Leo, you can hold on to me." He had clearly never been on a bus before, but he wasn't an idiot. Seeing people grabbing the overhead rail, he used his height to easily carve out a small space, protecting me in front of him. I held onto his waist tightly. When the bus lurched, he didn't move an inch. I felt so safe. I breathed in the alpha's pleasant scent, and a feeling of happiness that didn't belong to me made my heart flutter. When we got to my building, I didn't invite him in. If we had just met, I would have taken him inside without hesitation, shown him the kind of place I lived in, and scammed some sympathy money out of him. But this time, as he walked me to my door, I felt a sense of shame. I didn't want to expose my pathetic, useless self to him. "See you tomorrow." I was about to turn away when he called out to me. "Leo, do you want to see my campus?" My eyes widened in surprise, and I nodded happily. "Yeah." Under the streetlight, Julian's gaze was soft and bright. "I'll pick you up tomorrow." His university was huge and beautiful. Even the grandest buildings in the lowers couldn't compare. I was curious about everything. He naturally took my hand and even took me to his dorm room, though he rarely stayed there. We made it official that day. He confessed his feelings to me with a bouquet of roses. It was a grand affair. He had invited a lot of his friends. I was dizzy with joy, my mind constantly repeating, "I'm only agreeing to be with him for the money." It was as if saying it would somehow lessen the fear and unease that came from our vast difference in status. The moment I said yes, I felt like I was going to cry. That night, he pinned me to the bed and marked me, revealing the raw, fierce side of an alpha. "Leo, I'm so happy." It hurt a little at first, but I gritted my teeth. Me too." Julian's eyes were bloodshot. "You're so good for me, baby," he rasped. A sob escaped my lips. I had quit my job at the bar a while back and started working at an expensive bakery. I regularly sent money to the director and Rico. I didn't say anything else. The day Julian confessed to me, his friends were all happy for him, but none of them thought we would last. I was from the lowers. Julian hadn't looked into my background, but his parents had. In the car, Mrs. Croft, elegant and poised, frowned when she smelled the alpha's pheromones on me. "You got close to my son for money." I nervously picked at my fingers, my head bowed, not answering her. He's been spending time with an Omega he gets along with very well lately. My head snapped up. What? You haven't noticed? Julian has been coming home to your place very late recently, the woman said coolly. We don't care about matching social statuses, but the gap between you two is too vast. He's intrigued by you now, but over time, it will inevitably fall apart. Besides, your intentions for getting close to him were not pure. She paused, softening her tone. Child, Julian has a gentle nature, but he isn't a fool. He can tolerate lies now because he likes you, but once he meets his destined mate, those lies will become the sharpest of blades. It won't end well for anyone. She had said so much, but I only heard one thing. Destined mate? Julian's mother looked out the window and sighed softly. A pheromone compatibility of over 99%. They're drawn to each other at first sight. I'm here because I hope you know when to back down. I don't want Julian's father to get involved. You're just a kid. I asked in a daze, then how do I leave? No, ma'am. Please just give me a few more days. For the next few days, I was incredibly clingy with Julian. When he came home, I would press against him, sniffing him. We had our first fight because he came home smelling of another Omega's pheromones. It was unavoidable, really. I sometimes came home with traces of other people's scents on me after being in crowded places. It was even more likely for someone like Julian, who was at the center of high society. There were too many people who could stand beside him, and I wasn't one of them. I threw the dinner he brought home on the floor, the greasy smell making me break down. Let's break up. Julian had been swamped with work lately, but coming home always made it feel worth it. Even though his Omega was throwing a tantrum, it showed I cared, that I was possessive. Julian was more satisfied than annoyed. He held me and soothed me. I'm sorry, baby. I didn't do enough. Don't break up with me. I love you. I cried silently into his chest. Don't say you're sorry. It's my fault. I was wild that night, clinging to him relentlessly. Julian almost lost control and permanently marked me. As if sensing something, he whispered a warning. Don't leave me, Leo. I'll go crazy. But the next day, there was a car accident. Someone drove their car off an overpass and into the sea. I didn't know about any of this. By then, Julian's mother had already had people forcibly take me back to the lowers. But no matter what, my leaving was a betrayal, an abandonment. It was unforgivable, and I left in such a dishonorable way. I truly regretted it. I should have ended things properly. Now he hated me. I didn't dare to dwell on the time I spent with Julian. Every time I woke up from those dreams, my heart felt empty. I zoned out for a moment before slowly picking up my chopsticks to eat. My heart ached, but my body felt pretty good. The baby was unusually quiet today, too. I just didn't know when Julian would be back. Around noon, someone brought me lunch. Chris, where's Julian? Chris, Julian's assistant whom I'd met before, whispered, in the car downstairs. I was stunned. Chris continued, the boss can't stay here for long, he still has work to deal with. He's probably thinking about whether to take you with him. He wasn't forcing me to leave, nor was he asking my opinion. He was still considering whether he was willing to take me back to the heights. It was as if I really wasn't that important. My heart clenched, and I retreated sullenly to my room. That afternoon, I was dozing off when Julian gently picked me up and carried me downstairs. My eyelids were heavy. Smelling the familiar scent of fruit wine, I managed to force my eyes open. Where are we going? Julian's face was a cold mask. He didn't answer. I was afraid he would leave me behind, but I was also afraid that if I went with him, I'd have no place to call my own in the future. When I left, I said quickly, I took a lot of your money, and your family doesn't approve of us. Julian, I'm just an ordinary Omega. I grew up in a group home, I never learned to be good. Back then, I was jealous of you. When I first saw him, the alpha's handsome face, his noble air, he was so high above me, untouchable. Yet he drew everyone's gaze. I'm a bad person, I said, the words feeling rough in my throat. I deliberately used my pheromones to seduce you. Even if you had permanently marked me back then, I would have just thought it was a good deal. That's the kind of shitty Omega I am. The alpha suddenly stopped walking. In the narrow alley, we were surrounded by his men. He glanced down at me, then continued walking, his jaw tight and sharp. Are you telling me all this to make me go soft on you again? It won't work. You're coming with me. After the baby is born, you can get lost. My nose stung, but perversely, a warmth spread through my chest. He had gone soft on me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even had the chance to say all that. We got back to the Heights around 6 or 7 in the evening. We took a private jet, so it was fast. I was exhausted and slept deeply. Julian carried me into a room. The nutritionist and doctor who had been with us came in to give me a quick checkup. Once they confirmed everything was fine, they left one by one. Julian was tired too. He had a cup of coffee and went to the study to continue working, catching up on everything he'd neglected. He ignored a call from his father but sent a message to his mother. After that, his father didn't call again. When he finally finished a portion of his work and came out of the study, he saw the round-bellied Omega standing barefoot at the door. Startled him. I jumped, startled too. I had been hesitating whether to knock when Julian suddenly opened the door. The alpha's brow furrowed. He scooped me up and carried me back to the room, his face cold. Why aren't you wearing shoes? Trying to make me feel sorry for you again? Julian was furious. Leo, I don't love you anymore. All I care about is my child. I know, I said quickly. Don't worry, the baby will definitely be healthy. I've had checkups. Julian suddenly got even angrier. He placed me on the bed. Right? You're just some poor, low-status Omega from the lowers. You may have despicably tricked me, but you were forced into it. Even if you fell in love with me, you were forced to leave in the end. You believe whatever they tell you. You're the victim here, you're the most innocent one. Is that what you want to hear? My eyes burned, and a lump formed in my throat. Don't talk to me like that. You never loved me, Leo, Julian said coldly. And I feel the same way. After the baby is born, I'll give you a large sum of money and send you away from here, back to your lowers, back to your Dr. Evans. I felt my eyes and nose fill with a sour sting. If I blinked, the tears would fall. Okay, I said, looking down. In that case, can you give me a little more money? Maybe I can become a self-made millionaire. Then, when I feel like we're on equal footing, I'll come after you. He was left speechless, a breath caught in his throat. In the end, he stormed out, slamming the door, though not with full force. I sat there awkwardly for a while before the housekeeper came in. She gently asked where I'd like to eat and brought me a pair of soft slippers that fit perfectly. It wasn't that the staff wasn't attentive. Julian just didn't want too many people near me. His personality had changed so much in the last 6 months. Without his orders, no one dared to come in. Ma'am, I asked, where's Julian? He's in the greenhouse downstairs. I want to go see him. The housekeeper said gently, the young master said you should eat first. Okay, I replied. Not long after I finished eating, Julian came back. I ate too much, I said, sneaking a glance at the person ignoring me. The little one inside is kicking me. The alpha went into the bathroom, uninterested. The baby was an accident. He wasn't that attached to it. I lay in bed and sighed. I should have ended things properly. Just disappearing like that, without a word, no one could accept that. I thought there was no future for us, that Julian would eventually hate me for my manipulative approach, so I took the money and ran. I really did run because I wanted to get as much money as I could at the time. I knew my place. I didn't want to get in the way of Julian finding his destined mate. And I was selfish enough to take the money he gave me and go back to the lowers. Even after giving a chunk of it away, I had enough left to live comfortably for a while. When Julian came out of the bathroom and got into bed, I slowly slid over into his arms, then shifted to sit on top of him. Do you want to? I asked, my face blushing. Julian frowned. Get off. He wasn't an animal. Last night was because he was furious, okay, maybe a little bit of an animal, but he had consulted a doctor beforehand, and it was safe. I took his hand and placed it over my heart. Husband, I've missed you so much. His Adam's apple bobbed violently. He looked at me on top of him. I was still thin, but my complexion had improved over the last 2 days. I looked good. Julian wasn't happy about that. He was supposed to be tormenting me. His hand moved slowly downward, his grip firm, and then he guided me to lie beside him. Get some sleep, and don't call me husband. I lay down and reached out to grab his hand. Husband. Julian sucked in a sharp breath. He wouldn't let me go out, so I spent my boring days watering the plants in his greenhouse. He had so many different kinds of roses. They were beautiful, but mostly, I just lay on the sofa and stared into space, not really thinking about anything. These past few days, Julian had been leaving early and coming home late, barely speaking to me. He wouldn't even torment me a little. It was no fun. Tonight, when he came home, I happily went to greet him, but then I smelled another Omega's pheromones on him. A sweet, caramel scent. It was familiar. My face changed, and I stopped in my tracks. I gave him a strange look. I managed to hold my tongue, but as he got closer, I quickly said, "My stomach feels a little weird. I'm gonna go lie down. No need to call a doctor." I turned and walked away. Julian's expression didn't change. Back in the bedroom, I stared at my phone for a while. Rico sent me a message asking how I was doing. I had messaged him to explain why I didn't show up for dinner that day, and I'd let them know I was leaving. I sent a half-hearted reply, a deep sense of helplessness washing over me. When Julian came in after his shower, I was already asleep. This time, I didn't move toward him. There was enough space for 2 more people between us. "If you have another Omega, can you let me go?" After I said it, I felt a pang of regret. Why couldn't I just be softer, say a few nice things to coax him? After a long moment, Julian said, "Oh." What was "oh" supposed to mean? So, should I leave tomorrow or right now? Scrambled up, ready to get out of bed. Julian sat up and snapped, "What are you doing in the middle of the night?" I took a few deep breaths and turned to face him. "Then what do you mean?" "Yes, I was wrong. I shouldn't have left without a word." "But Julian, are you completely blameless?" Julian froze. "Yes, I was wrong. This time it was my turn to be dumbfounded. I was trying to start a fight here." But Julian said seriously, "I was wrong not to respect you enough to look into your background. I was wrong to hide things about my family from you, which put you under pressure without me realizing it. But I don't have a destined mate. I'm not going to fall in love with someone over a little bit of pheromones. If you still don't believe me, I'll let you leave." Julian got out of bed. "You go to sleep. I'll stay in the guest room from now on." I immediately followed him. "How did you get someone else's pheromones on you?" He glanced at me. "The person you called my destined mate cornered me at the office. He tried to use his pheromones to make me lose control. I couldn't avoid getting some on me. The police have been called, and his family took him to the hospital." Then Julian added, "I have no relationship with him. His own pheromones are out of whack, but instead of getting treatment, he comes after me. I'm not his alpha. So what if their compatibility was 100%? It didn't help anything. It's not like it was untreatable. So annoying." Julian's face was dark. Seeing my silence, he said impatiently, "Fine, don't believe me." "No," I said, grabbing his hand. "I was just a little jealous. My pheromones might be low grade and I might be poor and uncultured, but I have a lot of pride. I'm trying to change." "I'm sorry." Julian's expression was still cold. "The other day you had that doctor's pheromones on you. Leo, you can't just do whatever you want because you think you're the weaker one." I explained it was because I didn't have your pheromones. My stomach hurt, my gland hurt, and my emotions were all over the place. Dr. Evans said the medication would be bad for my body, so he just used a little of his scent to calm me down. We were standing far apart, and my body was rejecting it anyway, so I was just going to tough it out. Who knew you'd show up that very day? You're so good." Julian's expression softened a little. I pulled him back to bed. "Don't stay in the guest room. I can't be without you." As I said it, my face grew hot, but I kept going. "When you're next to me, I sleep better." Julian's expression was neutral, but at least it wasn't scarily cold anymore. Unconsciously, I had been here for 2 or 3 months. As my due date approached, Julian stopped working overtime and came home on time. He looked thinner, and I didn't know what he was worried about, but at least his muscles were as firm and strong as ever. Very nice to touch. At night, when we were in bed, I would always ask him things. "When did you find me? Were you really angry back then? Did you ever think about getting revenge? Did you ever think it was better that I was gone? Jules, do you still love me?" I'd ask one of these questions every few days, and he would answer with a decent amount of patience. "A month before I came for you. That Dr. Evans guy has bad intentions. You're not to see him again." Furious. "No. Why would I? You owe me. You have to pay me back." "Yeah." I frowned. What's "yeah" supposed to mean? Julian went quiet. I took his hand and placed it on my stomach. "I love you. I love you selfishly." Julian's fingers curled. He pulled me into his arms and said softly, I know. The day the baby was born, I lay in the hospital bed, my hair stuck to my face, and asked him tiredly, Are you still going to kick me out? Julian held my hand, his eyes red and glistening with tears. He choked out, I'm sorry, baby. It had just been angry words. Asking him now was just twisting the knife. I did it on purpose. I fell asleep. His parents came to visit. Mr. Croft looked displeased, glanced at the wrinkled baby, and let out a heavy sigh. Julian's mother was much happier. The car accident had just been a warning from his father to Julian. Leo's disappearance had sent Julian into a depression for a while. But after he thought things through, he knelt before his mother. Mom, I really like him. Leo is a good person. He's my omega. Mrs. Croft pulled her son up. Jules, your status means you can have anyone you want, but you can't just have someone with nothing, not without giving yourself a voice in front of your father. So Julian never stopped working. In the month before he found Leo, he had secretly visited the Lowers a few times. He watched him wearing cheap t-shirts and shorts, flip-flops on his feet, laughing and throwing an arm around his friends. It made him so angry. But during those movements, the curve of his stomach was impossible to hide. His friends warned him not to add to his burdens. Leo would get a little upset. This is a happy surprise. I hit the jackpot. Don't say things like that. But he also had friends who supported him. The beta with the injured hand would smile foolishly and say, I'll take care of you both. That made Julian even angrier. Sometimes, Leo would see something that would make him suddenly start crying. Then he'd lock himself in his apartment for days. He got thinner and thinner as his belly got bigger. Julian couldn't wait any longer. He decided to just take him away. They'd figure out the rest later. At least with him, Leo wouldn't be worse off than he was now. The baby was a girl. The doctors said she was very likely an omega. She was unbearably cute. Julian's father would hold Chloe in his arms while he worked, and sometimes, during unimportant meetings, he'd keep her by his side. Then, when Mrs. Croft came to pick them up, he would complain that Julian and Leo were irresponsible for always leaving the baby with him. Mrs. Croft, with a cool expression, would pick Chloe up. If you don't want to watch her, I will. Saves me the trouble of coming to get you both before I'm even done with work. Mr. Croft would put a hand on her waist. I'll do it. He glanced at his wife's expression and breathed a sigh of relief. They were a so-called destined pair, but their relationship had always been lukewarm. He was used to being domineering and controlling. It was only after Julian got married that their own relationship had started to thaw. With the baby gone, I didn't really miss her much. My main focus was on self-improvement. I opened a few bakeries and learned about investing. After I made some money, I donated to the group home and invested in the Lowers myself. Believe it or not, I made a huge profit, though it was mainly because policies in the Lowers were changing. Security and other issues had improved a lot. When Julian got home from work, I would jump up from the sofa where I was studying. The moment he opened the door, I'd run and leap into his arms. Husband, you're home. Julian would catch me, his eyes smiling, and press a kiss to my cheek. One day, I suddenly remembered our reunion, how he seemed to be holding a cigarette between his fingers. But I never saw him smoke after that, so I didn't think much of it. I found out later that there was a time he had picked up smoking, but he quit just as quickly. At night, after he had worn me out, I would murmur drowsily, Jules, I love you. Baby, Julian would say, holding me tight, his voice gentle. I love you more.